If you'd asked me a year ago who I trusted most besides my husband, I wouldn't have hesitated. I would have said Daniel. He'd been Michael's best friend for more than 30 years, which meant he'd been part of my life for almost as long. He came to Thanksgiving dinners, backyard barbecues, birthdays, and anniversaries. He had a key to our house for emergencies, and I never thought twice about it. That's why, looking back now, the betrayal feels so much bigger than just my marriage. It feels like my entire life was built around people I believed would never lie to me. The night everything changed started like any other Tuesday. Michael came home later than usual, dropped his briefcase by the front door, and kissed my forehead instead of my lips. That had become his habit over the past few months. Small changes like that are easy to ignore when you've been married for 34 years. You tell yourself people get tired. Work gets stressful. Life settles into routines. While he showered upstairs, his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I glanced at the screen only because I thought it might be one of our kids. Instead, I saw a name I recognized. Rachel. She organized charity events around the neighborhood. We'd had dinner with her a handful of times since her divorce. She seemed kind, thoughtful, maybe a little lonely. The phone kept ringing. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. Hello? For a second, there was only silence. Then Rachel spoke in a voice so quiet it barely sounded like her. I can't keep pretending this isn't hurting your wife. My heart stopped. She must have realized it was me because she inhaled sharply. Oh. Another long silence. I'm sorry. The call disconnected. I stood there staring at the dark screen while the sound of the shower echoed upstairs. That single sentence replayed in my mind over and over. Not. I love him. Not. Leave your wife. Instead. I can't keep pretending. Pretending what? When Michael came downstairs, his hair was still damp. Who called? I watched his face carefully. Rachel. The color drained from his face so quickly that he didn't need to say another word. What did she want? I answered quietly. You tell me. He looked away. Just for a second. But after 34 years of marriage, 1 second was enough. That night neither of us slept. Or maybe he did. I simply stared at the ceiling until sunrise, listening to every breath he took beside me and wondering when I'd stopped knowing the man I'd married. The next morning he acted almost normal. Too normal. He made coffee. Asked if I needed anything from the grocery store. Talked about mowing the lawn over the weekend. His ordinary conversation felt rehearsed, like someone trying to hold together a cracked window with clear tape. I wanted to scream. Instead, I watched. Years of working in a library had taught me something valuable. People reveal more when they think no one is paying attention. So I paid attention. Michael suddenly took his phone everywhere. Even to get the mail. Even into the laundry room. He smiled at messages he never shared. He started saying things like, I'll be home a little late, without offering an explanation. The excuses sounded reasonable. Individually. Together, they formed a pattern. A week later Daniel stopped by carrying 2 bags of takeout. Thought I'd save you from cooking. That was Daniel. Always thoughtful. Always generous. He sat at our kitchen table talking about baseball while Michael laughed harder than I'd seen him laugh in months. Watching them together made something inside me ache. Were they laughing because life was normal? Or because they believed I'd never figure it out? When Michael stepped outside to answer a phone call, Daniel noticed me staring into my untouched dinner. You okay? I forced a smile. I'm just tired. He nodded. Michael's been carrying a lot at work. There it was again. Work. Always work. I looked him directly in the eyes. Has he talked to you about anything else? Daniel hesitated. Only for a heartbeat. But I noticed. Nah. Then he smiled. You know him. I did know him. Or at least I thought I had. That weekend I decided to visit the coffee shop downtown after finishing errands. Mostly because I wanted one of their cinnamon scones. At least that's what I told myself. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed Michael's truck. He'd told me he was helping Daniel organize his garage. I almost drove away. Instead, I parked across the street. 5 minutes later, Michael walked out of the cafe. Rachel walked beside him. They weren't holding hands. They weren't kissing. They simply stood outside talking. But it wasn't casual conversation. Rachel reached up and brushed something invisible off his shoulder. He smiled at her the way he used to smile at me when we were newly married. Soft. Comfortable. Effortless. Then she touched his arm. Just for a second. It was a tiny gesture. One most people wouldn't notice. I did. Because she'd stopped touching him like a neighbor. And he'd stopped reacting like a married man. I drove home before they saw me. For the first time in 34 years, our house didn't feel like home. Every picture on the wall suddenly looked like evidence from another lifetime. That evening Michael mentioned helping Daniel all afternoon. I waited. I wanted to believe he'd correct himself. He didn't. The lie came so naturally that it frightened me more than anything I'd seen at the coffee shop. After dinner, he fell asleep in his recliner while the television played quietly in the background. His phone rested on the side table. The screen lit up with a message before fading again. I wasn't proud of what I did next. But by then, I wasn't looking for reasons to trust him anymore. I was looking for the truth. I picked up Michael's phone with shaking hands. The message on the lock screen was short. We need to tell her. I can't keep doing this. Rachel. He'd changed his passcode a few weeks earlier, so I couldn't read the rest. But I didn't need to. That single sentence confirmed what my heart had already accepted. The next morning, after Michael left for work, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Instead of letting anger take over, I wrote down every odd thing I'd noticed over the past year. The late meetings. The sudden interest in neighborhood charity events. The lunches that somehow lasted 3 hours. The way he'd started smiling at his phone instead of at me. Once I saw everything on paper, it no longer looked like coincidence. It looked like a pattern. A few days later, I ran into Rachel at the grocery store. She froze when she saw me. I walked over before she could turn down another aisle. I think we should talk. Her eyes filled with tears almost instantly. She nodded. We met on a quiet bench at Riverside Park that afternoon. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Rachel whispered, "I'm so sorry." I looked at her calmly. I don't want apologies yet. I want the truth. She took a deep breath. It started after my divorce. Michael checked on me because everyone knew I was struggling. We'd have coffee after charity meetings. Then we'd text. At first it felt innocent. She wiped away a tear. But somewhere along the way, he became the first person I wanted to talk to every morning, and the last person I talked to every night. I closed my eyes for a moment. So while I thought my husband was growing distant because of work, he was giving someone else the conversations we used to have. She nodded without trying to defend herself. We never planned for it to happen. I answered quietly. Most betrayals aren't planned. Before leaving, Rachel said something that stayed with me. Daniel knew. He kept telling Michael he needed to tell you. That sentence hit almost as hard as everything else. Daniel knew. The man I'd trusted like a brother had been sitting at my dinner table, looking me in the eye, while helping protect a lie. That evening, I called Daniel. "I'd like you to come over tomorrow night. Everything okay? We'll talk when you get here." The next evening, Michael walked through the front door and immediately noticed Daniel sitting in the living room. Neither of them expected what happened next. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang again. Rachel stepped inside. The room felt completely silent. No one could pretend anymore. I looked at Michael. "I've spent weeks wondering what I did wrong." His shoulders slumped. "You didn't do anything wrong. Then why wasn't I worth the truth?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "I never meant for this to happen." I shook my head. "It happened one conversation at a time." He tried again. "We never slept together." For months, he'd probably believed those words would save him. Instead, they only made me sad. "I stopped asking myself whether you were unfaithful physically." I looked directly into his eyes. "I started asking why another woman knew your thoughts, your fears, your dreams, and your daily life better than your own wife." No one spoke. Even Daniel lowered his head. I turned toward him. "You looked me in the eye and told me it was work." His voice was barely audible. "I thought I was protecting my friend." "You protected his secret." Daniel nodded slowly. "You're right." Then Rachel spoke. "I should have walked away months ago." She wasn't crying for herself anymore. She was crying because she finally understood the damage. Michael reached for my hand. I gently pulled mine away. "I don't hate you." He looked surprised. "I hate that you made me question my own instincts. Every time something felt wrong, I convinced myself I was imagining it because I trusted you." Tears rolled down his face. "I was selfish." "Yes. I thought because it wasn't physical." "I know. You've said that 3 times." The room became painfully quiet. Finally, I stood. "I've already packed a bag." Michael stared at me. "I'm staying with my sister for a while." He looked completely lost. "Is this goodbye?" I answered honestly. "I don't know. But I do know this. I can't decide our future until I know who you are when you're no longer hiding." I walked out carrying only one suitcase. It wasn't dramatic. There were no slammed doors. No shouting. Just the quiet sound of a woman refusing to ignore herself any longer. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Michael started individual counseling. Not because I demanded it. Because he finally admitted he needed it. Daniel wrote me a handwritten letter accepting responsibility for choosing loyalty over integrity. Rachel resigned from the charity committee and sent one final message. "I hope one day you find peace. I'm deeply sorry for my part in your pain." For the first time in months, no one asked me to forgive them. They simply accepted the consequences of what they'd done. 6 months later, Michael and I met for coffee. The same cafe where I'd once watched him laugh with Rachel. This time there were no secrets between us. No hidden phones. No rehearsed excuses. Just 2 people speaking honestly. Whether our marriage would survive wasn't the question anymore. The question was whether trust could be rebuilt. Neither of us pretended to know the answer. As we finished our coffee, Michael quietly said, "I spent months looking for understanding from everyone except the person who had promised to walk through life with me." I looked out the window before answering. Love doesn't usually disappear all at once. It fades every time honesty is replaced with silence. I left the cafe with something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Not because everything had been repaired, but because I finally stopped carrying the weight of someone else's choices. If this story taught me anything, it's that emotional affairs rarely begin with romance. They begin with conversations that should have happened at home. And once trust is quietly traded for secrecy, even the strongest marriage can begin to crack. Healing starts the moment you stop doubting yourself and start believing what your heart has been trying to tell you all along.